So this very last introductory video for Hi-C Chemistry is about something unique to Hi-C Chemistry, and that is the way that it's graded. Hi-C Chemistry is not graded like a traditional course. It is graded on what are known as standards, and the standards we're going to be using for Hi-C Chemistry are the MYP standards for year 5, which corresponds roughly to the 10th grade year. So in this class, you're going to be assessed based on MYP content standards. And really, those are divided into 4 criterion. The first being criterion A, which is knowing and understanding. Really, those are things that we test on tests or quizzes. Really, this is your understanding of content. Then there's criterion B, which is what we call, MYP calls inquiring and designing, but really this is your ability to design labs. So how can I design appropriate laboratory experiments? Criterion C is your ability really to analyze data. MYP calls it processing and evaluating, but really this is after the lab is done, did I draw the appropriate conclusion? Did I do that correctly? Did I graph and make tables correctly? All that stuff. And then criterion D is really the holistic piece of all this. It's reflecting on the impacts of science, so it's asking the questions, how is chemistry important in the real world? So those are the 4 things that you're going to be evaluated on in this course. There are also 2 kinds of assessment in Hi-C Chemistry. There's formative assessment, and then there's summative assessment. In formative assessment, these are all your practice activities. So these are things like worksheets, short quizzes at the end of each module, just things to get you thinking about your learning and understanding of the content material. While these are graded for comments and feedback, so I'm going to say they're graded for feedback, they're not actually included in the gradebook. Summative assessments, on the other hand, these are what determine your grade. You won't have very many summative assessments, so it's kind of high stakes, but the formative assessments and the feedback you get on those formative assessments prepare you for the summative assessment. So sometimes formative assessment tasks will be graded for right and wrong, and you can just look at the comments I make on your Schoology assignments. But all summative assessments and a few formatives are actually going to use rubrics for your grade. So once you get the assignment back in Schoology, what you need to do is you need to actually look at the rubric. And it'll tell you where you fall on a scale from 1 to 8, with 1 meaning you have very limited understanding of the content material that's being asked of you, and 8 means you have a complete and thorough understanding and you can explain it to someone else. More important than the actual score 1 through 8, however, are the comments provided. So what you want to do is look at the rubric, and this is an example of an English rubric from Schoology. Look at the rubric and see the comments I make, because those comments you can learn from and then use those things to improve on future summative assessments, improving your score in the class. So based on whether an assessment is summative or formative, it's going to go in a different location in the Schoology gradebook. Formative assessments are going to go right here in the traditional gradebook. You'll be able to see whether things are completed and turned in, you'll be able to see my comments, and the numeric score you would have gotten if we were grading in a traditional manner. Additionally, there'll be some assignments that are graded by rubric in this gradebook, and you can click on those assignments for further comments. The summative assessments, however, are located here in the Mastery gradebook. What these do is they track your score 1 through 8 over time in each of the 4 criterion, A, B, C, and D. And when you look at this Mastery gradebook, it's going to look something like this. So this is an example of the Mastery gradebook from an English class. Now these numbers would change. They'd be 8 and that'd be a 0. And you see these scores, and maybe you got a 6 on this one, and an 8 on this one, and a 5 on this one. And these are all your criterion A assessments. What I would do is I track your score over time, and I can actually dig down deeper and click into these and see how you did on each of the substrands in each category. And then I'll determine basically a holistic view of kind of where you are. So if you've got a 6, an 8, and a 5, I'd probably say you're right around the level of 6. And I'd give you a 6 for criterion A. Criterion C, however, is a little different, as well as B. B, C, and D are all a little different. For those, because they're skills-based, those are going to build over time. So if I'm going to look for improvement, for example, in criterion C here, maybe you got a 4, a 3, and a 7, I might say because you're growing over time, you might be at a 6. Same thing in B here where it goes 5, 7, 5. I might say you're able to achieve a 7, so you're also at a 6 here. For me, what's difficult, and you as well, is it's my holistic view of kind of your progress over time in each category. So if you're not exactly sure where you stand, look at the gradebook, determine what you get, and then ask me, and we can debate what your score is 1 through 8 in each category A, B, C, and D. Finally, to determine your letter grade for the class, what I'm going to do is take your holistic score in each of the 4 categories, 1 through 8, and then add them all together. So let's say you got a 6 in each category. That would lead to a score overall of 24. So a 6 in A plus a 6 in B, C, and D. That would determine your overall course grade to be an A minus, and that's the grade I would put in PowerSchool for you for the class. On the other hand, let's say you do an 8 in 2 categories, you get an 8 and an 8, and then a 1 and a 1 in 2 different categories. 8 plus 8 plus 1 plus 1 is 18. That would put you here. That would give you a 4 and make your score for the class a B. So like I said, it's going to be a challenge to learn how to do this, but really the goal is based on improvement over time and finding those scores holistically. So by now you've probably seen my comments on some of the earlier assignments that they were formative assessments. If you're not really sure what that means, or you're not sure how you're being graded, come see me and I can walk you through this. My best guess is that you're going to start working through the course and then be concerned about where you are with your summative assessments, and then come see me, and that's fine too. Remember, we're in this together, and this is really about you taking control of your learning and looking to improve your understanding of chemistry knowledge.